jumping straight into the video, we're going to start off by brushing our brows. We're going to use this brush that I purchased from Walmart. It's by the brand Eco Tools. We're going to use this to help get all of our hairs somewhat in place without using any brow gel, just to kind of brush them out, make sure nothing is sticking to each other and they're nice and fluffy. Next, we're going to go ahead and prep our skin above our brows and on our forehead and just slightly under our brows. So we're going to use the Maybelline Fit Me Master Primer. This is going to help minimize our pores, give us a nice blur-like finish, and make sure that our concealer is nice and flawless sitting on our skin so we don't get any cakiness. Now, because I am a oily skin girl and I do not like when my brows start to get the oil popping through above my brows, gets really oily and below them, because that is the area where my skin is, and sometimes the oil even peeps through on my actual brows, I'm going to go ahead and apply some Milk of Magnesia. If you are a dry skin girl or a regular skin, then you do not need to do this step. You can definitely just skip it. If you have combination skin, then you'll want to put it in the areas that you have the oil popping through. So if it's in your forehead area, you're definitely going to want to place it there before you do your brows, because you definitely want it there before the concealer is applied. After I've allowed that Milk of Magnesia to fully dry, I'm going to go ahead and just refluff out my brows. This is going to help to remove some of that whiteness that you see from the brows, but I don't have to worry about it too much because once we actually fill in our brows, that will be removed. Using this razor that I got from Walmart, it's in the dollar bin section. I'm gonna go ahead and start to clean up my brows because I definitely need them to be redone. Now, I'm not gonna do any major reshaping or anything. I just want to do a little bit of cleanup to get those hairs that are forming at the bottom out of my way, because trust me, this is going to make a world of difference when you're doing your actual brows. It is really hard to conceal these brows when you have hairs that are out of place. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and clean up a little bit of this. I'm not reshaping because that's just not something I'm good at. I'm just getting a little bit of those hairs out of the way. Using this brow pencil that I got from the brand NYX or NYX in the color Espresso. Now it's time to finally do our brows and fill them in. So when you do your brows, you want to keep in mind that you have the front of your brows, you have the tail, and then you have the arch. Okay, so there's 3 quadrants that you want to be very mindful of. So you want to make sure that you're following the shape of your brow, or if you don't have a shape, you want to create a shape. So I'm going to start off by doing the front of my brows. I am just creating a line and following the natural arch of my brows because I do have a really good arch in my brows. Here's a guide that'll help you to know where to end your brow. Take a pencil, line it up with the side of your nose, allow it to go on a slant, make sure it hits the edge of your eye, and then the tip of your brow. That is where you're going to stop the very end of your brow. So if you don't have a tail there, you're going to create a tail to allow it to be elongated. After I've created the line on the bottom of my brows, I'm going to go ahead and follow the lining of the top of my brows as well, making sure to follow around the curve of that arch and making sure that I am filling in the end of my brows. I do go a little darker on the end of my brows because they're a little bit more sparse, and that is to make sure that they're very prominent. After I've done that, I'm going to take very light strokes to fill in my brows to make sure that they are all the same color, because I have some areas that are a little bit more sparse than others where you can see gaps. I want to make sure I fill all of that in. Continuing those light strokes, I'm going to make sure to fill in the front of my brows as well. It is going to look a little boxy, but we will clean that up later. I'm going to use my spoolie to help blend that color that I put in my brows. I want to blend that out instead of actually coloring it all in. I'm just making light strokes, and then the brush is going to help mesh the colors all around the brows. I hope that's making sense. Also, I make the front of my brows longer because we will clean that up later. Trust me, you will need this. Just follow along with me. Trust the process. Using this spoolie, I'm just going to show you guys how we want to make sure that our brows are leveled. So this is going to be my guide to make sure that the other brow is leveled and parallel to the one I just did. Taking the tip of my pencil, I'm going to line it up with that brow I did, and then just go ahead and drag across so I can make sure my line is going to be nice and even with the other brow. I'm going to go ahead and continue to draw out the bottom of this brow, making sure I'm following my natural arch and creating my tail just like I did on the first one. I know this is looking crazy, I know, but when I say trust the process, I promise you trust the process. These brows will look good later. I'm just someone who creates like a unibrow, and I create a lot of darkness and depth in order to make my brows, and then I'm going to clean it all up later because it's easier for me to overbuild and then go ahead and clean everything up once I'm done. Now for the sake of this video, I'm going to go in with the Morphe M167 brush. This is actually a eyeshadow brush, an oval eyeshadow brush, which I find to be easier for beginners to use. And to clean up the bottom of my brows, I want a slight highlight, so I'm going to go in with the LA Girl Pro Concealer in the color Fawn. Now we're going to go ahead and apply that concealer at the bottom of our brows, following the line and the guide that we created to clean everything up. This is going to help to make sure all of your lines on your brows are clean and crisp. This is also the perfect time to clean up the tail of your brow. If you made it too thick or if you made it too long, you're going to use the concealer to carve that out, to make it thinner and to make it shorter. Morphe does have an actual angled concealer eyebrow brush, which is the M165, but I typically use the M432, which is actually an eyeliner brush. But the reason why I'm using this brush today is because I find that when I teach beginners, it is a lot easier for them to use a brush that has an oval tip. After I've completely carved out my brows, I'm going to go ahead and flick my concealer going down to help to mesh this down to my eyelids. The reason why you want to do this is to also make sure you're concealing the below your eyebrows. But if you're someone who likes to use an eyeshadow base, then you want to take this to the point of where the top of your lids begin and to make sure you're blending that out. But I actually use concealer as my base on my eyelids. So in part 2, you will see me apply that later. Now we're going in and we're going to buff out all that concealer to make sure we're blending it into the skin so that it's going to have a skin-like finish to it, and to make sure everything is completely buffed out and not having any harsh lines. And the brush I'm using to do this is the Eco Tools shading brush. The reason why I'm using this brush is because it is fluffy, but it also is flat on each side, and it's very easy to properly buff out when using this brush. To buff, you want to make sure you're using stippling motions, or what some like to call tapping motions. It is called stippling motions in the makeup world. So you're just going to go ahead and make sure you're tapping that all the way over and blending out all the harsh lines. Once I've completed the bottom section of one eyebrow, I like to go over and do the bottom section of the other eyebrow, and then I'll work on the top eyebrows later. And the reason for doing this is because I use two different colors when I do my bottom and another color when I do my top. And I also use two different sides of the brushes. So doing my bottom section, I'm using one side of the brush because I'm using a lighter color. And then once I do the top section of my brows, I'm going to use a color that's a little closer to my skin tone. And then I'm going to use the opposite side of that brush so that I'm not mixing the two colors and making any type of highlight on the top of my brow. I do not like when there's a highlight on the top of your brow because it's not supposed to be carved out and highlighted. Also, as you can see, when I carve out my brows at the bottom, I pick up my eyebrows, like kind of like if you were to say who or huh, where you're lifting your brow. I lift my brow because it really helps me to carve out, because I do have really hooded eyes, and then above the hood of my eyes, it's pretty meaty. So this is to help me stretch my skin that's above my eyelids, and to make sure that it's nice and sleek and carved out, nice and clean. For the top of my brows, I'm going to go in with my LA Girl Pro Concealer in the color Fawn because it's closest to my skin color. And I'm going to go ahead and start to carve out and conceal the top of my brows, making sure to follow the shape of my natural arch and to clean up any lines that may be out of place. I'm going to also make sure that I put some focus on the arch as well as the tail end of my brows to make sure that they are the exact size that I want them to be, as well as the length. Going in with the same brush from before, I'm going to go ahead and buff out the top of my brows to make sure I'm pushing all of that concealer and blending it into my skin and blending out any harsh lines that I may have. And again, I am using the other side of the concealer to make sure that I'm not mixing the two colors and causing the concealer above my brows to get any lighter. Once both brows are complete, I'm going to go ahead and take my spoolie and I'm going to use the tip of the spoolie, about the first 1/3 of the spoolie, to blend out the front of my brows. I'm going to do light strokes and I'm going to be flicking out. This is going to help buff and blend out the front of my brows so I can have that gradient look. When doing this, you want to be very light-handed and very quick with your strokes so that you can flick all of the color out and it's going to have a gradient effect. This is going to make a unibrow in the front when you do it on both sides, but no worries, we're going to clean up that unibrow later. Now, using our buffer brush from before, we're going to go ahead and buff the unibrow section of our brows. And a guide to help you to know how long your brows should be in the front is you're going to take the end of your brush and you're going to line it up with the side of your nose, exactly where kind of the point of your nose starts to begin above each side of your nostril. You're going to go ahead and line it up with that, and that is where you want the front of your brows to start, because you don't want the front to be too tight and you don't want it to be too wide. Also, you do not want to apply any additional concealer to this area. You're just going to use the excess concealer that was left on your buffer brush. It's the perfect amount of concealer to buff out your brows. As you can see, I am also buffing into my brows. That is another reason why you do not want to add any additional concealer, because you want to be able to fade into your brows and to help that gradient effect. Now we have our completed brow look. Something that you want to remember when it comes to brows is brows are sisters, they are not twins. So don't get too hung up on if they are exactly the same. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Also check the description for the links for all the products used and mentioned in this video. Also, to see my beginner tutorial using all drugstore makeup, it's also linked in my bio. Again, thank you for watching my first video on my channel, and I'll see you in the next one, Pookies.